I flew to Los Angeles without warning and found my daughter dying alone in intensive care. Her husband was celebrating on a yacht, so I left him penniless. An hour later, he lost his mind. I am Tobias King, 72 years old, and I used to be the kind of man who ate competitors for breakfast in the corporate world of Chicago. I thought I had retired from destroying people, but that night, I realized the wolf inside me was just sleeping. Before I tell you how I dismantled a man's life in 60 minutes, please like and subscribe to the channel and tell me in the comments which city you are watching from. I want to know how far this story of justice travels. The automatic doors of Cedars-Sinai Medical Center slid open with a hiss that sounded like a snake warning me of the poison waiting inside. I didn't stop at the front desk. I didn't ask for directions. My private security team had already pinged my daughter's location to my phone. I walked with the heavy, rapid strides of a man who knows he is racing against the Reaper himself. The air in the ICU was cold, sterile, and smelled of rubbing alcohol and despair. Room 402. That was the number that had been burning in my mind for the entire 4-hour flight. I pushed the door open, and my heart, a muscle I thought had hardened into stone after 40 years of mergers and acquisitions, shattered into a million jagged pieces. There she was, Amelia, my little girl. The only good thing I had ever produced in this world. She looked so small in that bed. Her skin was the color of old parchment, and she was hooked up to so many machines that I could barely see her face beneath the tubes and wires. The rhythmic beep of the cardiac monitor was the only sound in the room, a mechanical countdown that terrified me more than any bankruptcy ever could. But it wasn't what I saw that made my blood run cold. It was what I didn't see. The chair next to her bed. The vinyl recliner that hospitals provide for family members who refuse to leave. It was empty, pushed back against the wall, cold, dustless. There were no flowers. There was no coat thrown over the back of a chair. There was no half-drunk cup of coffee on the tray table. There was absolutely no sign that anyone had been there to hold her hand while she fought for her life. I stood there gripping the foot of the bed so hard my knuckles turned white. My daughter was dying, and she was doing it alone. A nurse walked in, a young woman with tired eyes and a clipboard. She stopped when she saw me, surprised by the presence of a man in a 3-piece suit standing like a statue of rage in her ward. "Are you family?" she asked, her voice soft, practiced in the art of breaking bad news. "I am her father," I said, my voice sounding like gravel grinding together. "Where is her husband? Where is Brody?" The nurse hesitated. That hesitation told me everything. In my line of work, silence is an answer. It usually means someone is hiding a liability. She looked at the empty chair, then back at me, and I saw a flash of pity in her eyes. Pity for me. Pity for Amelia. "Mr. Maxwell left about 4 hours ago," she said carefully, choosing her words as if walking through a minefield. "He said he was too overcome with grief. He said he couldn't bear to see her like this. He told us he needed to go to a sanctuary to pray for her soul. To pray." The word hung in the air like a bad joke. I looked at Amelia's unconscious form. 3 years ago, I had stood at an altar and handed this woman to Brody Maxwell. I had given them a wedding gift that most people would call a lottery win. $5 million. I bought them a villa in Malibu because I wanted my daughter to be safe. I wanted her to have a husband who would protect her, cherish her, and sit in a damn uncomfortable hospital chair when she was hurt. I thought I was buying her security. Instead, it seems I just financed a lifestyle for a leech. "He went to pray," I repeated, my tone devoid of any belief. "Yes, sir," the nurse said, though she didn't look convinced either. "He seemed very distraught. He said he was going to the chapel and then to meet with his spiritual advisor." I nodded slowly. I didn't yell at the nurse. It wasn't her fault. I simply pulled out my phone. My hands were steady now, The shock had passed, replaced by a cold, clinical focus. I knew Brody. I knew the man who spent more time grooming his beard than he did working on the startup business I had funded. Brody didn't pray. Brody didn't have a spiritual advisor unless you counted his bartender. I dialed his number. It rang once, twice, 3 times. I watched my daughter's chest rise and fall, mechanically driven by a ventilator, while I waited for the man who promised to love her in sickness and in health to answer his phone. "Hello, Dad, Brody." Oh, gosh, his voice came through the speaker. He was whispering. It was a theatrical, breathless whisper designed to sound like a man broken by sorrow. "Brody," I said, keeping my voice level. "I am at the hospital. The chair is empty. Where are you?" "Oh, Dad. It is just too hard." He sobbed, or at least made a sound that mimicked a sob. "I am at the cathedral downtown. I am on my knees, Dad. I am begging God to save her. I just couldn't watch the machines anymore. I needed to be close to the Holy Spirit. It was a good performance, almost Oscar-worthy. Except for one thing. Brody was careless. He hadn't muted his surroundings properly. In the background, beneath his fake whimpering, I heard something. It wasn't the solemn quiet of a cathedral. It wasn't the chanting of monks or the murmur of prayer. It was a rhythmic thumping, a heavy bass beat. Thump, 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 and then the distinct clink of crystal glasses toasting. And a laugh. A woman's laugh, high-pitched and carefree. "You are at the cathedral?" I asked, my eyes narrowing as I looked at the heart monitor tracking Amelia's struggle. "Yes, Dad. It is very peaceful here." Brody lied the bass in the background, getting louder for a second, as if a door had opened. "I am lighting a candle for her right now. Please tell me there is good news." "There is news, Brody," I said, my voice dropping to a register that used to make CEOs sweat in boardrooms. "Stay there. Keep praying. I will handle everything here." I hung up the phone before he could say another word. I stood in the silence of the ICU, but my head was full of noise. I looked at my daughter one last time. I brushed a strand of hair from her forehead. Her skin was cold. "I promise you, Amelia," I whispered to her. "He won't get away with this." I walked out of the room and signaled to the head of my security detail who was waiting in the corridor. "Track him," I ordered. "We already have, sir," he replied, handing me a tablet. "The GPS on his phone isn't at the cathedral. He is at the Marina del Rey." I looked at the map. The blinking blue dot was stationary on the water. "He is on the boat," my security chief confirmed. "The one you bought for them last Christmas. The Amelia's dream." He wasn't praying. He was partying. On a yacht named after the dying woman he had abandoned. The rage that filled me wasn't hot. It was absolute zero. It was the kind of cold that burns. I didn't just want to hurt him. I wanted to erase him. I wanted to turn his life into ash before the sun came up. Just then the chief of surgery came around the corner looking frantic. He spotted me and rushed over, sweat beading on his forehead. "Mr. King, thank God you are here," he said, breathless. "We need to operate immediately to relieve the pressure on her brain. It is critical. But we need a signature from the next of kin or a legal guardian." I frowned. Her husband. Brody. Didn't he sign the forms before he left? The doctor shook his head, his face grim. "That is the problem. We called him 3 times. He refused to give verbal consent over the phone. He said he needed to consult his lawyer about the liability risks of the surgery before signing anything. He is stalling, Mr. King. And if we don't operate in the next hour, your daughter is going to die." The world stopped. It wasn't just neglect. It wasn't just a party. He was stalling. He was letting the clock run out. He wanted her to die. I looked at the doctor. "Bring me the papers. I will sign everything. Do whatever you have to do to save her." As the doctor ran back to the nurse's station, I took out my phone again. But this time, I didn't call Brody. I called Harper, my personal attorney, a woman who was more shark than human. "Wake up, Harper," I said. "We have a situation. Activate the Omega Protocol. I want Brody Maxwell destitute by sunrise. I want his accounts frozen, his assets seized, and his debts called in. I am going to the marina. By the time I get there, I want to own the very deck he is standing on." This was not going to be a simple divorce. This was going to be an execution. And Brody Maxwell had no idea that the executioner was already on his way. I hung up the phone, and the silence in the ICU felt heavier than lead. Brody was praying, lighting candles, seeking solace in the Holy Spirit. The lies dripped from his mouth like cheap syrup. I didn't scream. I didn't throw the phone against the wall, though every fiber of my being wanted to shatter something. In the business world, they called me the Ice King because I never let emotion dictate my next move. Rage is useful fuel, but a terrible driver. I tapped the screen of my phone and dialed a number that wasn't in any public directory. It connected immediately. "Find him," I said. I didn't need to say a name. My head of security, a former Mossad agent named Lev, knew exactly who I was talking about. We had been tracking Brody's spending for months, but tonight I needed more than credit card receipts. I needed coordinates. "On it," Lev replied. His voice was calm, efficient, detached. Just the way I liked it. "Give me 5 minutes." 5 minutes. It felt like 5 years. I looked back at Amelia. My beautiful Amelia. She was the only thing in this world that mattered. When my wife Sarah died 20 years ago, she left me with a hole in my heart and a little girl with eyes the color of the ocean. I promised Sarah I would protect her. I promised I would give her everything she never had. And I did. I gave her the best schools, the best clothes, the best life money could buy. I shielded her from the cruelty of the world. I let her believe that love was pure, that people were good. That was my mistake, my fatal error. I raised a lamb, and then I let her marry a wolf. Brody Maxwell, the charming entrepreneur with the $1 million smile and the $10 soul. I knew what he was the moment I met him. I saw the way he looked at our estate, not with appreciation, but with appraisal. I saw the way he ordered the most expensive wine without knowing how to pronounce it. But Amelia was in love. She was glowing. She told me he was her soulmate. She begged me not to ruin it with my cynicism, with my contracts and my background checks. "It is true, love, Daddy." She had said, her eyes shining with tears. "Please just be happy for me. Just this once, don't be the businessman. Be my dad." So I relented. I let her marry him without a prenup. I gave them the house in Malibu. I funded his venture capital firm that never seemed to venture or capitalize on anything. I thought if I filled his pockets enough, he wouldn't need to empty hers. I was a fool. A rich, powerful fool. My phone buzzed. It was Lev. "He is not at the cathedral," Lev said. "I know," I replied. "Where is he?" Marina del Rey, Lev confirmed. "Dock 42. He is on the yacht. And sir, he is not alone. There are at least 20 guests. Catering trucks were seen leaving an hour ago." "The marina?" "Of course. The yacht I bought them for their first anniversary. The Amelia S. Dream. He was throwing a party on the boat named after his dying wife. The audacity was breathtaking. It was almost impressive in its sheer monstrosity." "Thank you, Lev," I said. "Keep watching him. Don't let him leave." I hung up and stared at the phone. My hand was shaking now, not from shock, but from the sheer force of the violence I was holding back. He was celebrating, while she was fighting. For every breath he was popping champagne corks. Suddenly the door to the ICU room burst open. It was the chief of surgery again, but this time he looked even more frantic than before. His face was pale, and there was a sheen of sweat on his upper lip. "Mr. King, we have a serious problem," he said, his voice tight. "What is it?" I asked, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Is she worse? She is critical," he said. "We need to relieve the intracranial pressure immediately. Every second we wait causes more irreversible damage. But we can't operate." "Why not?" I demanded. "I just told you to bring me the papers." "We can't accept your signature," the doctor said, looking miserable. "We just got off the phone with the hospital's legal department. Since she is married, her husband is the primary legal next of kin. Unless he is incapacitated or unreachable, his consent takes precedence. And Mr. Maxwell—" He paused and looked down at his clipboard as if he couldn't believe what he was reading. "Mr. Maxwell spoke to our legal team 10 minutes ago," he continued. "He explicitly stated that he does not give consent for the surgery yet. He claims he needs to review the liability waivers and consult his own attorney about the potential risks of the procedure. He said he is worried about the quality of care and doesn't want to make a rash decision." A rash decision. My daughter's brain was swelling inside her skull, and he was worried about a rash decision. "He is stalling," I said, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. "He isn't worried about the surgery. He is counting on the delay." The doctor nodded grimly. "In my professional opinion, yes, he is delaying, and if we wait for his lawyer to review the paperwork, it will be too late. She will be brain dead within the hour." The room spun. It wasn't just negligence. It wasn't just a party. It was murder. Passive, calculated, bureaucratic murder. He knew that if she died on the table, he might face questions. But if she died because the surgery was too risky, because he was just being a cautious husband, he would walk away with everything. The life insurance, the trust fund, the house, the yacht. He was gambling with her life, using the legal system as his weapon. He was betting that I would be too slow, too emotional to stop him. He didn't know who he was dealing with. He thought I was just a rich old man. He forgot how I got rich. "I didn't get here by following the rules," I said to the doctor. "I got here by rewriting them." I pulled out my phone again. This time I didn't call Brody. I called Harper, my attorney. She picked up on the first ring. "Tobias," she said, her voice sharp and alert. "What is happening?" "He is blocking the surgery," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "He is asserting his rights as next of kin to delay the procedure. He is trying to kill her, Harper." I heard the rapid clicking of a keyboard on the other end. "I am looking at the hospital's bylaws right now," Harper said. "We can file an emergency injunction. We can petition the court for emergency guardianship." "How long?" I asked. "Best case scenario," Harper said. 2 hours to get a judge on the line. Maybe 3 to get the order signed." "Too long," I said. "She has less than an hour." "Then we need leverage," Harper said. "We need to make him sign." "What do we have?" I looked out the window of the hospital room, towards the distant lights of the city, towards the marina. "We have everything," I said. Harper listened to me carefully. "I want you to buy the debt." "Which debt?" Harper asked. "All of it," I said. "I want you to buy the mortgage on the Malibu house. I want you to buy the loan on the yacht. I want you to buy his car note. I want you to find every cent he owes to anyone in this city, and I want you to own it." "Tobias, that will take time," Harper warned. "Not for you," I said. "You know the bankers. You know the sharks. Call in every favor I have ever done. Offer them double the value of the debt. Triple it. I don't care. Just get the paper. I want to be the only person Brody Maxwell owes money to in this world, and I want to call it all in tonight." I could hear the smile in Harper's voice. It was a cold, predatory smile. "Consider it done," she said. "I will have the papers in 20 minutes. I hung up. I turned to the doctor. "Get the operating room ready," I ordered. "But Mr. King, the legal department—" The doctor started to protest. Screw the legal department, I snapped. You prep the room. I am going to get that signature. I walked out of the ICU. I didn't run. Running is for people who are panicked. I wasn't panicked. I was on a mission. I walked past the nurses' station, past the security guards, past the weeping families in the waiting room. I walked out into the cool night air of Los Angeles. My driver was waiting at the curb. The marina, I said, as I got into the back of the black sedan. And step on it. As the car tore through the streets of LA, I looked at my phone. Lev had sent me a live feed from a drone he had deployed over the marina. On the screen, I could see the Amelia S. Dream. It was lit up like a Christmas tree. People were dancing on the deck. Waiters were passing trays of hors d'oeuvres. And there, in the center of it all, was Brody. He was wearing a white linen suit, holding a glass of champagne, and laughing. His head was thrown back, his arm around the waist of a blonde woman in a red dress. He looked like a king holding court. He looked like a man who had just won the lottery. Enjoy it, Brody, I whispered to the screen. Enjoy your last drink, because the hangover is going to be hell. I watched as he raised his glass in a toast. I couldn't hear what he was saying, but I could imagine. To freedom, to money, to the stupid old man and his dying daughter. He had no idea that the stupid old man was 10 minutes away. He had no idea that the debt he thought was his ticket to freedom was about to become a noose around his neck. I checked my watch. 45 minutes left. 45 minutes to save my daughter. 45 minutes to destroy her husband. It was plenty of time. I grabbed the clipboard from the doctors, shaking hands. I didn't ask for permission. I didn't wait for the hospital legal team to finish their debate about liability and next of kin. I pulled a fountain pen from my inside pocket, the heavy platinum Mont Blanc I used to sign mergers that dismantled companies, and I scribbled my signature across the bottom of the liability waiver. It was a document that said if she died on that table, I would not sue. It was a document that said I was taking full financial and legal responsibility for the life of my daughter. I am the bank. I told the surgeon, my voice low and dangerous, vibrating, with the kind of authority that doesn't leave room for argument. I am the law in this room. If you wait for that man to give you permission, you are an accomplice to her murder. You operate now, or I will bury this hospital under so much litigation, your grandchildren will be paying the legal fees. The doctor looked into my eyes and saw something that scared him more than a malpractice lawsuit. He saw a father who had nothing left to lose. He nodded once, sharp and terrified, and ran back into the trauma bay, shouting orders to his team. I watched them wheel Amelia through the double doors. I saw the lights of the operating theater flicker on. I couldn't go in there. I couldn't hold the scalpel. My job in that building was done. Now I had work to do outside. I turned to the two men standing silently behind me. Lev S. best operatives, ex-military. Stone-faced. No one gets in, I ordered, pointing at the swinging doors. Especially not her husband. If Brody Maxwell shows up here, if he tries to enter that room, if he even looks at the door, you stop him. Break his legs if you have to. But do not let him near her. Understood, sir, one of them said. I turned and walked out into the Los Angeles night. The air was cool, but my skin felt like it was burning. My driver held the door of the sedan open, and I slid into the leather seat. Marina del Rey, I said. The car surged forward, merging onto the freeway. I stared out the window at the blur of red taillights. Every minute that passed was a minute my daughter was being cut open, and a minute her husband was celebrating her demise. The drive felt like an eternity, but also like a blink of an eye. When we pulled up to the private dock, the smell of the ocean hit me, mixed with the smell of diesel and money. And there it was. The Amelia S. Dream. The 70-foot azimuth yacht I had paid for 3 years ago. I remembered the day I signed the check. Amelia had been so happy. She had smashed the champagne bottle against the hull, laughing, while Brody stood beside her wearing a Captain S hat, that looked ridiculous on him. Now that same vessel was a crime scene in my eyes. It was lit up like a floating nightclub. Blue and purple underlights made the water around the hull glow with an artificial toxic radiance. The bass from the speakers was so loud I could feel it vibrating in the wooden planks of the pier under my feet. It wasn't just music. It was a rhythmic, thumping disrespect, a celebration of freedom while my daughter lay in a coma. I didn't storm the gangway. I didn't scream his name. That is what a weak man would do. A weak man makes a scene. A strong man makes a plan. I stood in the shadows of the Harbor Master S office, shielded by the darkness, and raised the high-powered binoculars my security chief handed me. The lenses cut through the night, turning the chaotic party into a clear, sharp image. I saw them on the upper deck. There were about 20 people. Hangers-on. Parasites. The kind of people who smell money and swarm like flies. And in the center of them was Brody. He was wearing a white linen suit unbuttoned to the sternum. He looked like a man without a care in the world. He was holding a magnum of vintage champagne, pouring it not into glasses, but onto the deck, laughing as the expensive liquid foamed over the teak wood. He wasn't checking his phone. He wasn't looking at his watch. He wasn't worried. He looked relieved. And then I saw her. The woman from the drone feed. Cassidy. She was hanging off his arm, whispering something in his ear that made him throw his head back in delight. She was wearing a red dress that was barely there. But it wasn't the dress that made my vision blur with red rage. It wasn't her hand on his chest. It was what was around her neck. I adjusted the focus on the binoculars, my hands trembling with a rage so profound it felt like I was freezing to death. The diamonds caught the strobe lights of the yacht and sparkled with a fire I knew well. It was a vintage pendant. Art Deco. Platinum and diamond. My wife Sarah had worn that necklace on our wedding day 40 years ago. It was the last thing I gave her before she died. I had given it to Amelia on her 18th birthday. She never took it off. She said it made her feel like her mother was still with her. She said it was her talisman. And now, while Amelia lay with her skull cut open in a sterile room miles away, that necklace was draped around the neck of a gold-digging mistress. He had taken it from her. He must have taken it before she went to the hospital. Or maybe she had left it on the dresser and he had stolen it. It didn't matter how. What mattered was that he had looted the body before it was even cold. He was parading his trophy on the neck of another woman. That was the moment the last shred of mercy evaporated from my soul. I lowered the binoculars. My hand went to my pocket. I could have called the police. I could have had them raid the boat for noise, for drugs, for public indecency. I knew there was cocaine on that boat. I could see the way they were grinding their jaws. But the police have rules. The police have procedures. If I called the cops, Brody would be arrested. He would call a lawyer. He would post bail within an hour. He would spin a story about grief and stress. He would play the victim. No. I didn't want him arrested. Arrest is temporary. I wanted him erased. I wanted him to wake up in a world where he didn't exist. I wanted to strip him of every layer of protection he thought he had until he was naked and shivering in the cold, just like he left my daughter. I dialed Harper. She answered on the first ring. "We are ready on this end, Tobias," she said. Her voice was sharp, precise. "Execute Omega Protocol," I said. My voice was calm, terrifyingly calm. "Are you sure?" Harper asked. "This is the nuclear option, Tobias. We are talking about total asset seizure. We are talking about calling in debts that will bankrupt him 3 times over. Once we push this button, there is no going back. We are scorching the earth." I looked through the binoculars one last time. I saw Brody kiss the woman. I saw the diamonds flash on her neck. Sarah S. diamonds. "Look at the live feed, Harper," I said. "Look at her neck." There was a silence on the line as she checked the surveillance stream my team was broadcasting. I heard a sharp intake of breath. "Is that Sarah's necklace?" she whispered. "Yes," I said. "It is." There was a pause, a shift in the air. Harper had known Sarah. She had been at our wedding. "Burn him," Harper said. Her voice was cold as steel. "I am executing the buy orders now." "Good," I said. "I want him penniless before the sun comes up. I want the clothes on his back to be the only thing he owns. I want his credit cards to turn into plastic scrap. I want his car repossessed while he is looking at it. And Harper makes sure the tow trucks are waiting at the end of the dock." "Consider it done," she said. "The banks are processing the transfer. You own his debt in 5 minutes." I hung up the phone and watched the party. They were dancing. They were drinking. They were celebrating the death of my daughter. "Dance while you can, Brody," I whispered to the cold night air. "Because the music is about to stop. And when it does, you are going to find out that you don't own the floor you are standing on. You don't own the champagne you are drinking. You don't even own the name on the back of the boat." I turned to my security chief. "Get the launch ready," I said. "We are going to pay them a visit." "But not yet. Let him finish his drink. I want him to be holding an empty glass when I take his life away." I turned my back on the neon glow of the yacht party and the thumping bass that vibrated in my chest like a second angry heartbeat. Harper had her orders. The financial demolition of Brody Maxwell had begun. But while she was stripping him of his assets, I needed to strip him of his cover story. I needed to know exactly how my daughter ended up at the bottom of a staircase with her skull fractured. My driver got me back to Cedars-Sinai in record time. The hospital was quieter now, the late-night lull before the dawn shift. I walked past the waiting room where families slept in uncomfortable chairs and headed straight for the nurses' station outside the operating theater. The surgery was still underway. The red light above the double doors was a constant unblinking eye staring me down. I found the intake administrator, a tired woman typing reports behind a glass partition. I didn't ask nicely. I didn't wait for her to acknowledge me. I placed my hand flat on the counter. "I want the intake report for Amelia King," I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it carried the weight of a man who could buy the building. "I want the paramedics' notes. I want the initial attending physician ACS assessment. And I want the photos taken when she arrived." She started to recite the privacy laws. She started to tell me about HIPAA regulations and patient confidentiality. I cut her off. "My daughter is having her skull opened up 10 feet away," I said, leaning in close. "Her husband is currently incapacitated. I am the power of attorney. I am the checkbook that keeps this wing funded. Give me the file, or I will have the board of directors here in 20 minutes to fire you personally." It was a bluff, but a good one. She handed over a tablet with the digital case file. I took it to a corner of the waiting room and sat down. My hands were steady, but my stomach was churning acid. I scrolled to the incident report. The narrative was simple. Too simple. It read, "Patient found at the bottom of the main staircase in primary residence. Husband reports she lost her footing while descending. Mechanical fall. Blunt force trauma to the left parietal lobe. Mechanical fall." That is medical speak for an accident. A trip. A slip. A clumsy mistake. I swiped to the photos. They were hard to look at. My beautiful girl, bruised and broken. Her face was swollen. There was a laceration on her forehead. But I didn't focus on the injuries that came from the fall. I looked for the injuries that came before the fall. I zoomed in on her wrists. There they were. Faint purplish marks on the inside of her forearms. To an untrained eye, they looked like shadows or maybe intravenous bruising from the paramedics. But I didn't have an untrained eye. I grew up on the south side of Chicago before I wore Italian suits. I learned to fight in alleys before I fought in boardrooms. I knew what a defensive wound looked like. Those weren't marks from hitting a banister. Those were finger marks. Someone had grabbed her, hard. Someone had held her wrists while she struggled to pull away. The image triggered a memory that hit me with the force of a physical blow. 2 weeks ago, my phone had rung late at night. It was Amelia. She was crying so hard I could barely understand her. "Daddy, he is stealing from me," she had sobbed. I checked the joint trust account, the one for the baby we were planning. "It is empty, Dad. $300,000. Gone." When I asked him about it, he laughed. He said he invested it. He said I was being paranoid. I had felt the rage then, but I had tamped it down. I told her to be calm. I told her not to confront him again. I told her I would have my accountants look into it and we would fix it legal and clean. I told her to lock her bedroom door. I was a fool. I told her to wait because I wanted to build a case. I wanted a clean divorce. I treated her life like a business transaction. And because I waited, because I didn't fly out there that very night, she was lying on an operating table. He didn't just steal the money. He realized she knew. He realized the gravy train was about to derail. I looked back at the tablet. A fall down the stairs didn't explain the bruises. It didn't explain the lack of defensive wounds on her palms. If you fall forward, you put your hands out to catch yourself. Her palms were clean. She hadn't fallen. She had been incapacitated before she went over the edge. I stood up, pacing the small waiting area. The pieces didn't fit. Brody was weak. He was a coward. He wouldn't have the stomach to beat her into submission. He would need a cleaner way, a quieter way. Just then I felt a presence behind me. I turned around. It was a nurse, not the one from the front desk. This was a young man, probably in his late 20s, wearing blue scrubs. He looked nervous. He kept glancing at the security cameras in the ceiling. "Mr. King," he whispered. "Yes," I said, stepping into the blind spot of the hallway pillar. "I was the triage nurse when she came in," he said, his voice shaking. I drew her blood work before she went to scans, and I asked, sensing he was holding back something vital. "The attending physician." "He is a good man, but he is overworked," the nurse said rapidly. He looked at the trauma. He looked at the head wound. He treated the immediate threat, but he missed something in the blood panel. Or maybe he didn't miss it. Maybe he just thought it was a lab error because it didn't make sense. What didn't make sense, I demanded, gripping his shoulder. The nurse reached into his pocket and pulled out a crumpled printout. It wasn't part of the official digital file I had just read. It was a raw lab result. Her glucose levels were critically low, the nurse said. 40 milligrams per deciliter. She was in hypoglycemic shock. But look at the insulin levels. I looked at the numbers. I didn't need to be a doctor to see the anomaly. The insulin level was off the charts. It was sky high. "Is my daughter diabetic?" I asked the nurse, even though I knew the answer. "No, sir," the nurse said. "Her medical history is clean. No diabetes. No history of hypoglycemia. There is no physiological reason for her to have that much insulin in her system. Her pancreas couldn't produce that much if it tried." I stared at the paper. The numbers blurred into a red haze. "Exogenous," the nurse whispered. "That is what we call it. It came from outside the body." "Someone injected her," I said, my voice flat. The nurse nodded. "A large dose. Enough to cause confusion, dizziness, muscle weakness. Enough to make someone pass out or stumble. If you injected someone with that much insulin and they were standing at the top of a staircase, they wouldn't be able to catch themselves." I finished the sentence for him. They would fall like a stone. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't a fight that got out of hand. It was a cold, calculated execution. Brody knew he couldn't beat her in a physical fight. She was fit, she was strong. So he drugged her. He waited until she was disoriented, until her brain was starving for sugar, until her legs gave out. And then he gave her a push. The bruises on her wrists were from him holding her steady while he stuck the needle in. I looked at the nurse. Does anyone else know this? I put the note in the file, but I think it got lost in the shuffle of the emergency surgery, the nurse said. I just thought you should know. It didn't feel right. The husband, he was asking about the autopsy. Before she was even dead, he asked if an autopsy would be mandatory for an accidental fall. That was the final nail. Thank you, I said to the nurse. You just saved my daughter justice. I walked back to the window. I looked out at the city lights. Harper was currently destroying Brody's financial life. But that wasn't enough anymore. Bankruptcy is a problem for a living man. Brody Maxwell didn't deserve to be a living man. He was a murderer. He had tried to commit the perfect crime. He used a weapon that disappears from the bloodstream, a weapon that mimics natural causes. He thought he was smart. He thought he was the wolf, but he forgot one thing. Wolves hunt in packs. But a lion hunts alone. And he had just walked into the lion's den. I took a picture of the lab report and sent it to my private server, encrypted and secure. Then I texted Harper. Change of plans. Do not just bankrupt him. Trap him. I needed him to come to the hospital. I needed him to walk into this room thinking he had won. I needed to see the light go out of his eyes when he realized that I knew everything. The surgery doors opened. The doctor came out looking exhausted. Mr. King, he said. I turned slowly. The grief was gone. The fear was gone. There was only the mission. Is she alive? I asked. She is, the doctor said. We stopped the bleeding. She is in a coma, but she is alive. Good, I said. Keep her alive, because her husband is coming to visit, and I want her to hear him scream. My phone vibrated in my hand, cutting through the sterile silence of the waiting room like a drill. It was Harper. I answered immediately. My eyes never leaving the red light above the operating theater doors, where surgeons were currently trying to repair the damage my son-in-law had caused. Report? I said, my voice flat. It is worse than we thought, Tobias, Harper said, her voice lacking its usual composure. I pulled his credit file. I pulled the property records. Tobias, the Malibu house is leveraged. That is impossible, I snapped. I paid cash for that estate. $5 million. The deed is clear. It was clear, Harper corrected, until 6 months ago. Brody took out a hard money loan against the property. Since his name is on the title as a joint tenant with right of survivorship, he didn't need Amelia's signature for a loan up to 50% of the value. He borrowed $3 million, Tobias. $3 million. I felt a vein in my temple throb. I had given them that house as a sanctuary, a fortress against the world, and he had turned it into an ATM. Where is the money? I asked, though I already suspected the answer. Gone, Harper said. I traced the transfers. He moved it all into offshore crypto exchanges. He was gambling, Tobias. He was betting on altcoins and futures. He lost it all. Every cent. The lender has already sent a notice of default. They were going to foreclose next week. The pieces of the puzzle slammed together with a deafening click. The insulin. The fall. The delay in calling 911. The delay in signing the surgical consent forms. It wasn't just about getting rid of a wife he didn't love. It was about survival. He was drowning. He was days away from being homeless, from being exposed as a fraud who had squandered a fortune. He needed a bailout. Did he have insurance? I asked, my voice dropping to a whisper. Harper sighed. That is the final nail, Tobias. He took out a term life policy on Amelia 30 days ago. $10 million. with a double indemnity clause for accidental death. If she dies from a fall down the stairs, he gets $20 million tax-free. $20 million. That was the price tag he put on my daughter's life. He was going to use her blood money to pay off his gambling debts and buy himself a new life with his mistress. It was so simple, so crude, so utterly devoid of humanity. He isn't grieving, Harper, I said. He is waiting for a wire transfer. What do you want to do? Harper asked. We can freeze the insurance payout. We can tie it up in probate for years. No, I said. That is defense. I want to play offense. Who holds the note on the Malibu house? A private equity firm in Nevada, Harper replied. Silver State Lending. They are sharks, Tobias. They charge 12% interest, and they don't negotiate. I almost laughed. Sharks. They thought they were sharks. Buy it, I ordered. What Harper asked. Buy the note, I said. Call Silver State. Offer them full face value plus 10% for the paper. Do it right now. I want to be the holder of the mortgage. I want to own the debt on that house. Tobias, that is $3.3 million, Harper warned. You are throwing good money after bad. The house might not even be worth that much in this market. I don't care about the real estate, I snarled. I care about the leverage. If I own the note, I can call the loan. I can accelerate the debt. I can foreclose tonight. What about the yacht? Financed, Harper said. Marine lender in Florida. He owes $2 million on it. He hasn't made a payment in 4 months. They have a repossession order out, but they haven't been able to locate the vessel. Buy that too, I said. Buy it all, Harper. I want you to buy every single debt Brody Maxwell has. His credit cards, his car loans, his personal lines of credit. I don't care if he owes money to his bookie. You find the marker and you buy it. I paused, taking a breath that tasted of antiseptic and vengeance. By the time he steps off that boat, I want to be the only person in the world he owes money to. I want to own the shirt on his back. I want to own the air he breathes. I understand, Harper said, her voice shifting from lawyer to executioner. I am making the calls now. Give me 30 minutes. 30 minutes. That was all it took for me. My company, King Capital, didn't just merge businesses. We bought distressed debt. We bought the financial souls of failing empires and decided who lived and who died. This was my playground. Brody thought he was playing 4D chess because he knew how to open a crypto wallet. He didn't realize he was playing against the man who wrote the rulebook on hostile takeovers. I hung up the phone. I looked at the lab report in my hand. The insulin levels, the proof of murder, and now the financial motive. The picture was complete. Just then my phone chimed. A text message. I looked down. It was Brody. Daddy, the text read. The doctor called me. He said the situation is critical. He said she might not make it through the night. I am coming back now. I am so scared. Please tell me she is going to be okay. I can't live without her. I stared at the screen. The audacity was nauseating. He was still playing the role. He was setting the stage for his grand entrance as the grieving widower. He was coming to the hospital not to hold her hand, but to ensure she died. He needed to be there when the monitor flatlined, so he could perform his grief for the doctors, so he could sign the death certificate, so he could collect his $20 million. He was scared, all right. He wasn't scared of losing her. He was scared of the foreclosure notice arriving before the insurance check. I typed a reply, my thumbs moving slowly and deliberately. Come to the hospital, Brody. We need to talk. I didn't tell him she was stable. I didn't tell him I knew about the insulin. I didn't tell him I just bought his house out from under him. I needed him here. I needed him to walk into this trap willingly. I put the phone in my pocket. I walked over to the window and looked down at the street. I imagined him scrambling off the yacht, telling his mistress to wait, putting on his sad face, rehearsing his tears in the back of an Uber. He thought he was running toward a payday. He didn't know he was running toward a buzzsaw. Harper sent me a confirmation text 3 minutes later. Malibu note acquired. Yacht note acquired. We are the lien holder. Default notices are being drafted. It was done. Technically, Brody Maxwell was now living in my house, sailing on my boat, and driving a car that belonged to me. He was destitute. He was a trespasser in his own life. The surgery doors opened again. A nurse stepped out. "Mr. King," she said softly, "you can come in now. She is in recovery." I turned away from the window. The financial ruin was just the appetizer. The main course was about to be served, and I was going to make sure Brody choked on it. I looked at the text message from Brody claiming he was rushing back to the hospital, and I knew I had to stop him. If he came back now, he would throw himself on the floor and weep. He would play the role of the devastated husband perfectly for the doctors and the nurses. He would turn this tragedy into his personal stage, and I would lose the element of surprise. I needed him on that boat. I needed him surrounded by his vices, his mistress, and his arrogance when I pulled the rug out from under him. I didn't want him here holding my daughter's hand. I wanted him there holding a bottle of champagne. I typed a reply, my fingers moving with the precision of a sniper adjusting his scope. "Stay where you are, son," I wrote. "The doctors are working. It is a mess here. I need you to keep praying. Your spiritual strength is the only thing helping her right now. I will handle the logistics. Do not come until I call you." I hit send. It was the kind of message a controlling father-in-law would send, the kind of message that gave a coward exactly what he wanted. An excuse to avoid reality. I knew Brody. He didn't want to see blood. He didn't want to hear the monitors beeping. He wanted to be told that someone else was handling the hard part while he waited for the wire transfer. I watched the delivery receipt turn into a read receipt. He didn't reply. Of course he didn't. He was probably relieved. He had done his duty. He had offered to come. Now he could go back to his party with a clear conscience. I put the phone away and walked into the recovery room. The air was heavy with the smell of antiseptic and silence. Amelia lay there, still as a statue. Her head was wrapped in heavy bandages. Her face was pale, bruised, swollen, but she was breathing. The rhythmic rise and fall of her chest was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. The surgeon, Dr. Aris, was checking her vitals. He looked up when I entered. "The surgery went better than expected, Mr. King," he said. His voice hushed. "We relieved the pressure. The swelling is going down. She is in a coma, but her brain activity is stable. She is a fighter. If she makes it through the next 12 hours, her prognosis is good." I nodded, feeling a wave of relief so strong it almost brought me to my knees. She was going to live. My girl was going to live. But then I looked past the doctor to the corner of the room. There was a nurse standing there, a young woman with dark hair adjusting an IV drip. I had seen her earlier. She was the one who had been texting frantically when I first arrived. She was the one who had looked at Brody with a little too much familiarity when he visited last week, according to my security logs. If Brody had a mole inside the hospital, it was her. She was the leak. I needed Brody to believe he had won. I needed him to let his guard down completely. I needed him to celebrate. I walked over to the bed and took Amelia's cold hand in mine. I leaned in close to the doctor, but I pitched my voice just loud enough for the nurse in the corner to hear. "Doctor," I said, letting my voice crack with fake despair. "Be honest with me. The damage is too extensive, isn't it?" The doctor looked at me confused. He opened his mouth to correct me, to say that she was stable, but I squeezed his arm hard, giving him a sharp look that said, "Play along." He was a smart man. He closed his mouth. "I don't think she's going to make it through the night," I said, my voice trembling. "Look at her. She is fading. I need to prepare myself for the end." I buried my face in my hands, feigning a sob. "I am so sorry, Mr. King," the doctor said, catching on slowly, though he clearly didn't understand my game. "We are doing everything we can, but—" "It is not enough," I interrupted. "She is gone. I can feel it. My little girl is gone." I stayed like that for a moment, shoulders shaking, listening. I heard the soft squeak of rubber shoes on linoleum. The nurse was moving. She checked the monitor one last time, then slipped quietly out of the room. I waited 10 seconds. Then I stood up, my face instantly dry and composed. "Thank you, doctor," I said. "Keep her stable. And don't let that nurse back in this room." I walked out into the hallway and pulled out my tablet. I opened the app that controlled the surveillance drone hovering 500 feet above the Marina del Rey. The feed was crystal clear in 4K resolution. I saw Brody on the deck of the Amelia S. Dream. He was looking at his phone. The glow of the screen illuminated his face. I zoomed in. I saw the exact moment he got the text. I saw his eyes widen. I expected him to look sad. I expected him to at least pretend to cover his mouth in shock. Even when no one is watching, most people maintain the mask. But Brody Maxwell wasn't most people. He was a monster. A grin spread across his face. It started slow, and then took over his entire being. It was a look of pure, unadulterated ecstasy. He threw his head back and let out a shout that the drone-S microphone picked up over the thumping music. "I am free," he screamed. "I am finally free." He didn't drop to his knees. He didn't call his mother. He turned to the bar and grabbed a magnum of Dom Perignon. He shook it violently, the expensive wine foaming inside the green glass. He popped the cork and sprayed it into the night air, laughing like a maniac. The woman Cassidy ran over to him. She looked concerned for a second, probably wondering if the news was bad. He grabbed her by the waist and spun her around. "She is not going to make it," he shouted over the music. "The old man just told me. She is done. We are rich, baby. We are rich." Cassidy's concern evaporated. She laughed a high, piercing sound that made my skin crawl. She grabbed his face and kissed him hard. 20 million, she asked, breathless. 20 million, he confirmed, pouring the champagne into her mouth. And the house. And the boat. "It is all ours. No more hiding. No more pretending. Ding dong, the witch is dead." I watched them on the screen. I watched him dance on the grave of the wife who wasn't even dead yet. I watched him toast to his own victory. I hit the record button. This was it. The financial ruin I had unleashed with Harper was just business. It was cold. It was numbers on a spreadsheet. But this video, this was the end of his soul. This was the evidence that would turn every jury, every judge, and every person in America against him. It proved motive. It proved malice. It proved he was devoid of humanity. He wasn't grieving. He was partying. I saved the clip to 3 different secure cloud servers. I sent a copy to Harper. I sent a copy to the district attorney's personal email address, a man I played golf with on Sundays. "You think you are free, Brody?" I whispered to the tablet. "You think the nightmare is over. But you are wrong. You just woke up." I saw him refill his glass, his movements loose and sloppy. He was drunk on power, drunk on money he didn't have, and drunk on premium vintage. I checked the time. The tow trucks would be arriving at the marina gates in 10 minutes. The bank notifications would start hitting his phone in 15. I picked up my phone and texted Harper one word. Now. I wanted to be there when the music stopped. I wanted to see his face when the lights went out. I put the tablet in my briefcase and signaled to my security team. "Let's go," I said. "The party is over." As we walked to the car, I replayed the video in my head. "I am free." Those were his words. I was going to make sure that for the rest of his miserable life, the only thing Brody Maxwell would be free of was hope. He would never be free again. He would be owned by the state, by the prison system, and by the memory of the night he celebrated too soon. The drive to the marina was a blur of streetlights and cold fury. I wasn't Tobias King the father anymore. I was Tobias King the reaper, and I had a harvest to collect. My driver navigated the dark streets of Los Angeles with the smooth precision of a predator stalking prey, but my focus wasn't on the road. It was on the tablet resting on my knees. The drone feed had given me the visual proof of Brody's celebration, but I needed more. I needed the words. I needed the confession. I needed to hear the rot in his soul, so I could excise it without a shred of hesitation. I opened a secure application on my tablet. It was a piece of software developed by my old firm specifically for high-net-worth clients who needed to keep an eye on their assets. When I bought the Amelia S Dream, I didn't just pay for teak decks and Italian leather. I paid for a state-of-the-art security system with internal cameras and microphones in every room except the bathrooms. Brody didn't know about the remote access codes. He thought the security panel in the captain's quarters was the only control. He was wrong. I had the master key. I always kept the master key. I tapped the screen and the feed switched from the aerial drone view to the interior cameras. The main salon was empty save for a few empty bottles rolling on the floor. I switched to the aft deck. Empty. I switched to the master stateroom. There they were. Brody and the woman Cassidy. They had moved the party inside away from the wind, but not away from my eyes. They were sitting on the edge of the king-sized bed, the bed that was supposed to be my daughter's sanctuary. Brody was refilling their glasses, his movements loose and sloppy, the adrenaline of his perceived victory mixing with the alcohol. I turned up the volume on my tablet. The audio was crystal clear. "Baby, you should have seen the old man's text," Cassidy said, her voice slurring slightly. She kicked off her heels and curled her legs under her. He sounded so pathetic. "Stay where you are, son. Keep praying." Brody laughed, that same high-pitched cackle I had heard earlier. "He thinks he is in charge. He thinks he is protecting me from the trauma. If he only knew. He is going to be so surprised when he finds out you are the sole beneficiary," Cassidy giggled, running a hand through Brody's hair. "Do you think he will try to fight it?" "Let him fight," Brody sneered. "The policy is ironclad. Accidental death, no prenup on the life insurance, and the house title is in my name too. He can sue me all he wants. By the time the lawyers are done, we will be living on a beach in Saint-Tropez." I watched them, my blood running cold. They were already spending the money. They were already planning their escape. "Hey," Cassidy said, pouting slightly. "Speaking of spending, when that witch finally kicks the bucket, you promised me something. Remember?" Brody leaned in, kissing her neck. "I promised you the world, babe. You promised me a Porsche." Cassidy corrected him, pulling back to look him in the eye. "A 911 Turbo S in chalk gray. You said when we pulled this off I could have whatever I wanted." I zoomed in on Cassidy's face. The resolution was high enough to see the pores on her skin. And then it hit me. The recognition slammed into me like a freight train. I knew that face. I knew that voice. It wasn't from a club. It wasn't from a socialite magazine. I had seen her in my daughter's kitchen 2 months ago. She wasn't wearing a red dress then. She was wearing scrubs. Cassidy wasn't just a mistress. She was the private nurse Brody had hired to help Amelia when she started feeling fatigued. Brody had told me Amelia was having trouble sleeping, that she was stressed, and he wanted a professional to monitor her diet and vitals. He had introduced Cassidy as a top-tier wellness consultant. My God. I felt bile rise in my throat. We had invited the killer into the house. We had paid her salary. The insulin. The low glucose levels. It all made sense now. Brody didn't inject her. He didn't have the medical knowledge to know exactly how much to use to incapacitate her without killing her instantly. Cassidy did. She was the one who administered the daily vitamins. She was the one who prepared Amelia's smoothies. She had been poisoning my daughter slowly, methodically, right under our noses. And now she was asking for a Porsche as a reward for a job well done. Brody laughed and grabbed Cassidy's hand, kissing her knuckles. "A Porsche," he scoffed. "Babe, with $10 million in cash and another 10 in assets, I won't just buy you a Porsche. I will buy you the whole damn dealership. You earned it. You were perfect. The way you handled the dosage tonight. Surgical." There it was. The confession, recorded in high-definition audio and video, stored securely on my private cloud. He had just admitted to the conspiracy. He had just confirmed that Cassidy was the executioner. My hand tightened around the tablet until the screen warped slightly under the pressure. They were monsters. They weren't just greedy. They were evil. They had turned care into a weapon. They had turned trust into a murder weapon. But just as the rage threatened to blind me, my other phone buzzed on the seat beside me. It was a single notification, a green light in the darkness. I picked it up. It was a secure message from the bank. Transaction complete. Debt acquisition finalized. Transfer of ownership recorded. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. The air in the car suddenly felt cleaner. The suffocating weight of helplessness vanished, replaced by the cold, hard weight of ownership. I opened the attachment. It was a list. A beautiful, devastating list of everything Brody Maxwell owed. I owned the mortgage on the Malibu mansion, $3.2 million. I owned the marine loan on the Amelia's Dream, $2.1 million. I owned the lease on his Range Rover. I owned his personal credit card debt, which was staggering nearly $400,000 across 6 cards. I even owned a personal loan he had taken out from a shady hard money lender in Vegas, a debt Harper had miraculously tracked down and purchased for cents on the dollar. Total liability, $6.1 million. Brody Maxwell didn't have $6 million. He didn't have $6,000. He was banking on $20 million of blood money that was never going to come. I looked back at the tablet screen. Brody was pouring more champagne, oblivious to the fact that the ground beneath his feet had just shifted tectonically. He thought he was the king of the world. He thought he was celebrating on his yacht, in his master stateroom. He was wrong. He was celebrating on my yacht. He was drinking my champagne. He was sleeping with his accomplice in my bed. He was trespassing. I looked at the driver. "How far?" "2 minutes, sir," the driver replied. "We are passing the security gate now." "Good," I said. I picked up the phone and dialed Harper. "It is done," she answered before I could speak. "You own him, Tobias. Every cent. Paperwork," I asked. "Filed electronically," Harper said. "You are the lien holder of record. You have the right to accelerate the debt immediately due to the breach of contract clauses regarding illegal activity and misuse of collateral." "Illegal activity," I repeated, looking at the video of the drug-fueled party. "Oh, we have plenty of that." I hung up. I looked at the tablet one last time. Brody was laughing again, oblivious. "I hope you enjoyed the Porsche dream, Cassidy," I whispered, "because you are about to find out that the only thing Brody can afford to give you is a ride in the back of a squad car." The car slowed down. We had arrived at the marina. I saw the flashing lights of the tow trucks Harper had arranged waiting in the shadows like wolves. I saw the outline of my private security team standing at the end of the dock. I opened the car door and stepped out. The sea air was cold and salty. I buttoned my jacket. I adjusted my cuffs. It was time to go aboard. It was time to introduce the new owner. I stood at the end of the dock, shrouded in the mist that rolled off the Pacific, my eyes fixed on the tablet screen. The digital glow illuminated the grim satisfaction on my face. On the deck of the Amelia S. Dream, the party was reaching a fever pitch. The champagne was flowing like water, but even the deepest wells run dry eventually. I watched as Brody signaled to the head of the catering staff, a man in a black vest holding a digital payment terminal. More Brody shouted over the music, his voice slurring with unearned confidence. "Bring out the reserves, the Cristal, and get some of that beluga caviar from the galley. We are celebrating tonight." The caterer nodded professionally and presented the terminal. It was a substantial bill. Thousands of dollars in alcohol and premium food consumed in less than 3 hours. Brody didn't even look at the total. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a heavy black card. It was the Centurion card. The black card. It had my daughter's name on it, but he wielded it like Excalibur. He thought it was a magic wand that could conjure a lifestyle he hadn't earned. He tapped the card against the machine with a flourish, a gesture of supreme arrogance. He turned back to Cassidy, grinning, waiting for the beep of approval. But there was no beep. There was a harsh, discordant buzz. The red light on the top of the terminal flashed once, twice. I zoomed in on the feed. I wanted to see the confusion in high definition. Brody frowned. He tapped the card again, harder this time, as if physical force could compel the banking system to submit to his will. "It is the chip," Brody snapped at the waiter. "Swipe it. The machine is glitching." The waiter swiped the card. He looked at the screen and then looked up at Brody, his expression shifting from subservience to suspicion. "I am sorry, Mr. Maxwell," the waiter said, his voice cutting through a lull in the music. "The card has been declined. The machine says pick up. That means I have to confiscate it, sir." The music didn't stop, but the laughter around Brody died instantly. The parasites, sensing a weakness in their host, went quiet. "Confiscate it." Brody laughed, a nervous, high-pitched sound. "Do you know who I am? That is an unlimited card. There is no limit." "Run it again." "It is declined, sir," the waiter repeated, holding his ground. "Do you have another form of payment?" Brody's face flushed a deep, ugly crimson. He dug into his wallet. He pulled out his personal platinum Visa, then his gold card, then a debit card from a local credit union. He threw them at the waiter one by one. "Try these," he barked. "It is a bank error. Their servers are probably down for maintenance." I watched as the waiter ran the first card. Declined. The second card. Declined. The debit card. Declined. Harper had done her work with surgical precision. Every line of credit associated with Brody Maxwell's Social Security number had been frozen, purchased, or maxed out by penalties she had triggered. He didn't just have bad credit. He had no credit. He was financially radioactive. Brody was sweating now. I could see the sheen on his forehead, glistening under the deck lights. His friends were exchanging glances. The whispers started. The women were pulling their shawls tighter, stepping back as if poverty were contagious. "This is ridiculous," Brody shouted, snatching the cards back. "Let me make a call. My private banker is going to hear about this. Heads are going to roll." He pulled out his phone, the latest model iPhone I had bought him for his birthday. He dialed a number and put it to his ear, plugging his other ear with a finger to block out the noise of the party he could no longer afford. I switched the audio feed on my tablet to intercept his call. I heard the ringing. Then the automated voice of the high net worth client services line. "Identity verified," the mechanical voice said. "Mr. Maxwell, please hold for an urgent message regarding your account status." Brody tapped his foot impatiently. He winked at Cassidy, mouthing 1 second, babe. Then a human voice came on the line. Cold, professional, unsympathetic. "Mr. Maxwell, this is the Fraud and Security Department." Finally, Brody hissed, "Unfreeze my cards. I am in the middle of an event, and your incompetence is embarrassing me." "Mr. Maxwell," the voice interrupted, "your accounts have not been frozen by error. They have been locked pursuant to an emergency request by the primary account holder's legal guardian." Brody froze. Guardian. My wife is the primary holder, he said, his voice trembling. And she is indisposed. I am her husband. I have power of attorney. Not anymore, sir, the voice said. We received a court-certified document 20 minutes ago. Due to Mrs. Maxwell's critical condition and an active investigation into financial irregularities, control of all joint and supplementary assets has reverted to her father, Mr. Tobias King. He has requested a full forensic audit. All spending is suspended immediately. Brody went pale. The color drained from his face so fast, he looked like a ghost. Her father, he whispered. But he is at the hospital. Mr. King has revoked your authorization, sir. The banker continued. We are also obligated to inform you that the outstanding balance on your mortgage and personal loans has been called due by the new lien holder. Have a good night. The line went dead. Brody stood there, the phone still pressed to his ear, the dial tone humming in the void. He looked around the deck. He looked at the champagne buckets he couldn't pay for. He looked at the fuel gauge of the yacht he couldn't refuel. He looked at the women he could no longer impress. He lowered the phone slowly. He forced a smile onto his face. It was a ghastly rictus of a smile, a mask slipping off a skull. Hey everyone, he shouted, clapping his hands, his voice cracking. Minor glitch. The bank's anti-fraud algorithm got triggered because we are partying too hard. You know how it is. Too much fun for the system to handle. He laughed, but no one laughed with him. The silence was excruciating. I will just wire the funds, Brody said, pulling up his banking app. Instant transfer. No problem. Drinks are on me. Don't worry. He tapped the screen of his phone. He tapped it again. He swiped down to refresh. I watched the screen of his phone through the high-resolution camera in the master stateroom window behind him. The little wheel spun and spun, and then a message popped up. Connection error. No service. Brody frowned. He looked at the top corner of his screen. Where there should have been 5 bars of 5G signal, there was nothing. Just the empty stares of signal death. And the small letters SOS. He held the phone up to the sky, moving it around like a divining rod, trying to find a signal. What the hell, he muttered. Check your phones, he yelled to the group. Is anyone else getting signal? It must be the marina. Cassidy pulled out her phone. I have full bars, babe, she said, looking at him with a mixture of confusion and growing disdain. I am streaming live on Instagram right now. Brody stared at her phone. Then he looked at his own. It wasn't the marina. It wasn't a dead zone. It was a cut line. He didn't know it yet, but he was on my family plan. I paid the bill for every device in my family, including his. It was a perk I offered when they got married to keep them on a secure encrypted network. But 10 minutes ago, I had called the provider. I didn't just suspend his service. I blacklisted the IMEI number of his device. That phone was now a brick. He was cut off. No money, no communication, no way to call a lawyer, no way to transfer funds, no way to call an Uber to escape the humiliation that was about to rain down on him. He stood there in his expensive suit on the deck of a boat he didn't own, holding a piece of glass and metal that wouldn't connect him to the world. He looked small. He looked trapped. I closed the tablet. I didn't need to see any more. The trap wasn't just set. It had snapped shut. His leg was caught in the iron teeth of reality, and he was just starting to will the pain. I signaled to my team. Start the engines on the launch, I said. As we moved across the dark water toward the Amelia S. Dream, I watched Brody's silhouette pacing frantically on the deck. He was trying to borrow a phone from one of his guests, but they were turning away from him. They smelled the desperation on him like cheap cologne. They knew the party was over before he did. He was alone, surrounded by people, but utterly, completely alone, just like he left my daughter. But unlike Amelia, no one was coming to save him. The only thing coming for Brody Maxwell was me. The Coast Guard cutter and my private interceptor sliced through the water boxing in the Amelia's Dream with aggressive precision. The blue strobe lights from the patrol boat washed over the yacht's hull, turning the festive atmosphere into something resembling a raid. The music died instantly, replaced by the nervous murmur of the party guests, who realized their night of free champagne was over. I watched from the bow of my tender as my head of legal enforcement, a man named Stone, who looked like he was carved from granite, stepped from the interceptor onto the yacht's swim platform. He was followed by 4 large men in tactical gear. They weren't police, but in the dark, they looked enough like a SWAT team to send a wave of panic through the crowd. Brody rushed to the railing, his face a mask of confusion. He waved his arms, likely thinking the cavalry had arrived to fix his frozen bank accounts. "Over here," he shouted. "There's been a mistake, I need assistance." Stone ignored him, climbing the stairs to the main deck with the heavy, purposeful tread of an executioner. He didn't look at the guests or the spilled drinks. He walked straight up to Brody and thrust a document bound in blue legal paper into his chest. "Mr. Maxwell," Stone said, his voice projecting clearly across the silent deck, "I am the authorized representative for King Distressed Asset Management, the new holder of the note on this vessel." Brody stared at the paper, blinking rapidly. "King, that's my father-in-law's company." "Correct," Stone replied, his face impassive. "Mr. King purchased the marine mortgage on this vessel 17 minutes ago. You are currently in default." "Default?" Brody let out a high, hysterical laugh. "That's impossible. I missed a few payments, sure, but I have a grace period. My lawyer said they wouldn't move to seas for at least 90 days. "You didn't read the fine print, did you, Mr. Maxwell?" Stone asked. It wasn't really a question. I knew Brody never read the fine print. When he signed the loan documents 3 years ago, I had been there in the background. I had seen the lender slip in a standard insecurity clause, Section 14, Paragraph B. It was a trap for high-risk borrowers, stating that if the lender reasonably believed the collateral was at risk due to the borrower's conduct, illegal activity, or reckless behavior, the loan could be accelerated immediately. No grace period, no 90 days, immediate payment in full. "What fine print?" Brody demanded, sweat glistening on his forehead. "Section 14, Stone said, calm as the grave. "The insecurity clause. We have evidence that this vessel is being used to facilitate illegal narcotics distribution and is currently under the command of an intoxicated operator. Furthermore, the borrower has attempted to use the vessel's equity to secure unauthorized gambling debts. This constitutes a material breach." "Narcotics," Brody sputtered. "That's ridiculous. We're just having a party." Stone motioned to one of his men, who shone a high-powered flashlight onto a glass table near the jacuzzi. The beam illuminated lines of white powder and a rolled-up $100 bill. The guests nearby recoiled, shielding their faces from the light, like vampires caught in the sun. "That looks like a material breach to me," Stone said. "The loan is called Mr. Maxwell. The total outstanding balance is $2,140,000. Unless you can produce a cashier's check for that amount right now, we are taking possession of the ship." Brody looked at the check. He looked at his dead phone. He looked at his frozen credit cards. The reality of his situation crashed down on him. He wasn't the captain anymore. He was a trespasser. "You can't do this," he screamed, his voice cracking. "This is my boat. My name is on the hull. My wife is dying, you heartless bastards. You can't kick me off my own boat while my wife is dying." It was the wrong thing to say. A ripple of disgust went through the crowd. Even these parasites, people who lived for free drinks and clout, had a line. Hearing him use his dying wife as a shield to save his party boat crossed it. Stone stepped closer, invading Brody's personal space. "Your wife is the reason we are here," Stone said, his voice dropping to a menacing growl. "The primary borrower is Amelia King. You are just a guarantor, and since you have failed to protect the asset, we are relieving you of command. You have 5 minutes to vacate the vessel." Anything left on board after that becomes the property of the lien holder. The guests didn't need to be told twice. The whisper started low and spread like wildfire. Rippo, broke, fraud. The beautiful people, the influencers, the models, they all started moving toward the gangway. They didn't say goodbye to Brody. They didn't offer him a ride. They just wanted to get away from the stink of failure. I watched Cassidy from my vantage point on the tender. She was smart, smarter than Brody. She saw the ship sinking, and she knew there were no lifeboats for the captain's mistress. She started backing away, moving toward the crowd of departing guests. She kept her head down, trying to hide her face with her clutch, trying to blend in with the herd. She reached up and touched the diamond necklace at her throat. I saw her fingers linger on the clasp. She was checking to make sure her payday was still secure. She thought she could slip away into the Los Angeles night, pawn the diamonds, and find a new mark before the sun came up. She was wrong. Stone saw her too. He snapped his fingers and two of the security guards moved to block the gangway. "Nobody leaves with property that doesn't belong to them," Stone announced. "Bags will be checked." Cassidy froze. She looked at Brody, who was currently arguing with Stone, grabbing the lapels of Stone's jacket in a futile attempt to assert dominance. "Do you know who I am?" Brody was shouting. "I am going to sue you. I am going to bury you. My father-in-law will hear about this." "He is hearing about it," Stone said, simply glancing over his shoulder toward the dark water where I waited. "In fact, he is watching it." Brody stopped. He followed Stone's gaze. He squinted into the darkness. The spotlight from my tender hit him square in the face, blinding him. He raised a hand to shield his eyes. "Dad," he whispered. I didn't step into the light. Not yet. I let him stare into the beam like a deer caught on the highway. I wanted him to feel the presence of the man he had betrayed. "Get off my boat, Brody," Stone barked, pushing him toward the stairs. Brody stumbled. He looked around for support, but there was none. His friends were busy showing their purses to the guards, trying to prove they hadn't stolen the silverware. His kingdom had collapsed in 10 minutes flat, but he still had one card to play. Or so he thought. He looked for Cassidy. He looked for his partner in crime, his confidant, the woman who held the secrets to the murder plot. "Cassidy," he yelled. "Cassidy, call your lawyer. Tell them what is happening." Cassidy didn't turn around. She was near the front of the line, trying to push past a model in a silver dress. She kept her head down, ignoring him completely. "Cassidy!" Brody screamed, his voice tinged with panic. "Don't leave me!" She turned then, just for a second, and the look on her face wasn't love. It wasn't loyalty. It was pure, unadulterated loathing. She looked at him like he was a stain on her shoe. She realized he wasn't the golden goose anymore. He was dead weight. And Cassidy didn't carry dead weight. She turned back to the guard and opened her purse, showing it was empty of ship property. But she kept her hand on her neck, covering the diamonds. She was about to walk off the boat. She was about to escape. I picked up the radio handset on my boat. "Stone," I said. My voice amplified by the speakers on the repo vessel booming across the water like the voice of God. "The necklace." Stone nodded. He pointed at Cassidy. "Miss," he said. "The necklace. It is listed as collateral on the personal loan Mr. Maxwell defaulted on. Hand it over." Cassidy went pale. She looked at the necklace, then at the dark water, then at the guards. She was cornered. "Brody gave it to me, too," she screeched. "It is a gift. It is stolen property," Stone corrected. "Take it off or we call the police and add grand larceny to the list of tonight's entertainment." Brody watched in horror as the woman he had promised a Porsche to the woman he had killed for unclasped the necklace and dropped it into Stone's outstretched hand. She didn't look at Brody. She spat on the deck right in front of him. Then she ran down the gangway, her heels clicking a frantic rhythm of retreat. Brody was left standing alone in the middle of the deck. No guests, no mistress, no boat. Now you, Stone said, pointing to the dock. Brody looked at the water. He looked at me, hidden behind the light. He looked at the empty champagne bottle at his feet. This isn't over, he whispered, but the fight was gone from his voice. He walked down the stairs, his shoulders slumped, a king in exile. But the night wasn't done with him yet. As his foot touched the wooden dock, I signaled my driver. "Take the car," I said into the radio. On the shore, the tow truck engine roared to life. Brody's Range Rover, parked prominently at the entrance to the pier, was lifted into the air. The alarm started blaring a siren song for his dead lifestyle. Brody watched his car drive away. He reached into his pocket for his phone instinctively. Then he remembered. It was a brick. He stood there shivering in the cool ocean breeze. No ride, no phone, no money, no boat. He was exactly where he belonged. Nowhere. But I knew where he would go next. There was only one place left for a rat to run when the ship went down. He would run to the only person he thought still believed his lies. He would run to the hospital. He would run to Amelia. And I would be waiting. The megaphone crackled with a burst of static before Stone's voice rolled over the deck of the yacht like a thunderclap, silencing the last whispers of the few remaining guests who were lingering by the bar, hoping for one last drop of alcohol. All non-essential personnel must disembark immediately. This vessel is now private property under the jurisdiction of King Distressed Asset Management. You have 60 seconds to vacate the premises, or you will be treated as trespassers and handed over to local law enforcement. The threat of arrest was the final motivator. The stragglers dropped their half-empty glasses on the teak deck and scrambled toward the gangway, pushing and shoving in a desperate bid to distance themselves from the disaster unfolding before their eyes. But Brody didn't move. He stood center stage, his white suit stained with spilled champagne, his hair wild, his eyes manic. He was a captain who refused to believe his ship had already sunk. He lunged at Stone, grabbing the lapels of the man's dark suit with trembling hands. "You cannot do this," he screamed, his voice cracking with hysteria. "I am the owner of this vessel. Look at the registration. My name is on the hull. Do you know who I am? My father-in-law is Tobias King. He is the most powerful man in Chicago. If you touch me again, he will bury you. He will sue you into oblivion and turn your life into a living hell." I watched from the shadows of my boat anchored just 50 yards away. The irony was so rich I could taste it. He was invoking my name, the name of the man whose daughter he had tried to murder, to save himself from the man who was currently destroying him. He thought I was his shield. He didn't realize I was the sword. Stone didn't flinch. He didn't even blink. He looked down at Brody's hands on his jacket with an expression of mild distaste, as if a cockroach had landed on him. He slowly peeled Brody's fingers off, one by one, his grip like a vice. "Correct?" Mr. Maxwell, Stone said, his voice calm, cold, and carrying across the water. "Mr. King is indeed a powerful man, and 17 minutes ago he purchased the defaulted note on this vessel. He also purchased the lien on your home and the title to your car. He is the one who sent me." Brody froze. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. The color drained from his face, leaving him looking like a wax figure, melting under the heat of the spotlight. "He sent you," Brody whispered. Stone smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a shark that smells blood in the water. "He had a message for you," Stone said, leaning in close so only Brody and the cameras could hear. He said, "Get off his boat." Then Stone nodded to the security team. "Remove him." Two of the tactical guards stepped forward. They didn't ask nicely. They didn't offer a hand. They grabbed Brody by the arms, lifting him off his feet as if he weighed nothing. Brody kicked and screamed, flailing like a toddler having a tantrum. "Let me go, this is illegal." "I have rights," he shrieked as they dragged him across the deck, his expensive Italian loafers scuffing the wood he had once been so proud of. They hauled him to the gangway and tossed him. He didn't land on his feet. He landed on his hands and knees on the hard wooden planks of the dock, stumbling and scraping his palms. He scrambled up, looking around wildly. The humiliation was total. His friends, the people he had been buying drinks for all night, were standing in the parking lot, watching him be thrown out like garbage. They weren't helping him. They were filming him. Dozens of phones were held up, capturing his downfall for social media. Brody patted his pockets frantically, searching for his phone, his wallet, his keys. He found his phone and pulled it out, tapping the screen violently. But it was dead. A black mirror reflecting his own panic. He reached for his wallet, but his hands came up empty. He must have left it on the bar in his rush, or maybe one of his loyal friends had lifted it on their way out. He was stranded. No money, no communication, no dignity. He spun around, looking for his car, his Range Rover, his pride and joy, the symbol of his status. He ran toward the parking spot at the end of the pier where he had left it with the valet. But the spot was empty. There was only a tow truck turning the corner, its yellow lights flashing in the night, its hook dragging the luxury SUV away into the darkness. The alarm of the Rover was blaring a rhythmic pulsing siren that faded into the distance like the heartbeat of his former life. No, Brody screamed, running after the truck, his arms waving. "Come back. That is my car. Come back." He ran for 50 yards before he realized it was useless. He stopped, panting, his chest heaving, his white suit now dirty and disheveled. He stood alone in the middle of the asphalt, under the harsh glare of the streetlights. And then he saw her, Cassidy. She was standing on the curb near the marina exit, illuminated by the headlights of an approaching Uber. She hadn't left yet. She was waiting. Brody's face lit up with a desperate, pathetic hope. She was his partner, his accomplice. She knew the plan. She knew about the insurance money. If anyone could help him, it was her. "Cassidy," he yelled, running toward her. "Cassidy, wait." She turned to look at him. She was holding a plastic cup she had taken from the party, probably filled with the last of the champagne. Her expression was unreadable. Brody skidded to a halt in front of her, breathless. "Babe, thank God. It is a nightmare." The old man, he went crazy. He froze everything. He took the car. I don't know how he did it, but he found out about the loans. He grabbed her arm, his eyes wide and pleading. "But it doesn't matter. We still have the insurance. We still have the big payout. I just need a ride. I need to get to the hospital. We need to make sure the plan finishes. Call me a car. My phone is bricked." Cassidy looked down at his hand on her arm. Then she looked at his dirty suit. Then she looked at the empty spot where his car used to be. She did the math. She realized that the man standing in front of her wasn't a millionaire anymore. He was a liability. He was a broke, desperate criminal with a father-in-law who was hunting him down. "The insurance," she said, her voice flat. "You think you are going to get the insurance?" "Yes," Brody insisted. "It is accidental death. 20 million. We just need to be there when she dies." "You are an idiot," Brody Cassidy said coldly. "Look around you. His father knows. He knows everything. If he seized your assets that fast, he knows about the policy. He probably knows about the insulin, too." Brody shook his head in denial. "No, he can't know. He is just a senile old businessman. He is lashing out. We are smarter than him." Cassidy laughed. It was a harsh, cruel sound. She took a sip from her cup, swished the liquid around in her mouth, and then looked him dead in the eye. "You aren't smart, Brody. You are broke. And I don't date broke." She raised her hand and threw the contents of the cup right into his face. The sticky alcohol splashed over his eyes, his nose, his open mouth. He sputtered, blinded for a second, wiping the stinging liquid away. By the time he opened his eyes, Cassidy was already getting into the back of the black sedan that had pulled up. She slammed the door shut. Cassidy Brody screamed, banging on the window. "Open the door! Do not leave me here!" The car pulled away, leaving Brody standing in the exhaust fumes, dripping wet, broke and alone. He watched the taillights disappear into the city traffic. He stood there for a long moment, shivering in the cold night air. The adrenaline was fading, replaced by a creeping terror. He had nothing. No ride. No money. No allies. But then a thought crossed his face. I saw it through the zoom lens of my camera. A final desperate calculation. Amelia. She was his last card. His only card. If she was still alive, there was a chance. If she died while he was her husband, he was still the legal beneficiary. No matter what debts I bought, no matter what cars I towed, the law was the law. Unless I could prove murder, he was still the heir. He wiped his face with his sleeve. He looked toward the city, toward the hospital. He started walking. Then he started jogging. Then he started running. He was running to the hospital. He was running to his wife. He didn't know that he was running into the final trap. He didn't know that the hospital room wasn't a sanctuary. It was a courtroom. And the judge, jury, and executioner were waiting for him by the bedside. I lowered my binoculars. "Follow him," I said to my driver. "Let him run. Let him get tired. I want him exhausted when he arrives. I want him to have no fight left when I deliver the final blow." The engine of my car purred to life. The hunt was entering its final phase. Brody stood on the curb of the Marina access road, waving his arms like a drowning man at every passing set of headlights. The Uber that had taken Cassidy was long gone, and the few remaining cars leaving the parking lot swerved to avoid the disheveled man in the stained white suit stumbling into the lane. He looked pathetic. A king turned beggar in the span of an hour. Finally, a yellow taxi slowed down. The driver, a weary man with eyes that had seen every scam in the city, rolled down the window just an inch. Brody lunged at the gap, grasping the door handle. "Please," he gasped, his chest heaving, his breath reeking of expensive alcohol and fear. "I have an emergency. My wife is dying at Cedars-Sinai. I lost my wallet. I lost my phone. I will pay you double. I will pay you triple as soon as I get there. My father-in-law is there. He is rich. He will cover it." The driver hesitated, looking at the Rolex on Brody's wrist. It was the only asset Harper hadn't been able to seize remotely. "Get in," the driver grunted, unlocking the door. "But if you stiff me, I am calling the cops." Brody scrambled into the back seat, collapsing onto the vinyl. "Drive," he screamed, hitting the partition. "Just drive." I watched the taxi pull away from the curb through the lens of the security camera mounted at the marina gate. I put down my tablet and leaned back in the uncomfortable hospital chair next to Amelia's bed. The stage was set. The players were in motion. Now all I had to do was wait for the final act. I looked at my daughter. She was still sleeping, the deep chemical sleep of the coma, but her color was better. The monitors were steady. The nurse Inez, the one who had helped save her life, was sitting in the corner quietly updating charts. She looked at me with a question in her eyes. "He is coming," I told her. "When he gets here, do not say a word. Just watch." 20 minutes later, I heard the commotion in the hallway. It started at the nurse's station, shouting, the heavy thud of running footsteps. Brody wasn't just walking, he was sprinting. He had stiffed the taxi driver, jumping out of the moving cab at the emergency entrance and running through the sliding doors before the driver could even put the car in park. He had probably shoved past security using the same dying wife excuse he had used on the boat. It was his golden ticket, his get-out-of-jail-free card. The door to room 402 flew open with a bang that made the monitors jump. Brody stood in the doorway, framing himself like the tragic hero of a melodrama. He looked like a train wreck. His hair, which had been perfectly coiffed 3 hours ago, was a bird's nest of sweat and wind. His white linen suit was gray with dirt from the dock, stained with champagne and spotted with the sticky residue of the drink Cassidy had thrown in his face. He was panting, his chest heaving up and down so hard I could hear the wheeze in his lungs. He scanned the room wildly. His eyes landed on the bed. He saw the rise and fall of Amelia's chest. He saw the monitors beeping steadily. She was alive. For a split second, I saw the disappointment flash across his face. It was micro-expression, a tiny flicker of the eyelid, a tightening of the jaw. He had wanted to walk into a morgue. He had wanted to walk into a room where his problems were already solved. But she was alive, which meant he still had work to do. He still had to play the part. He threw himself onto his knees at the foot of the bed. He let out a wail that sounded more like a wounded animal than a grieving husband. "Oh God," he sobbed, crawling forward on the linoleum floor. "Oh God. Tobias, it is a nightmare. You have to help me, I have been robbed." I sat perfectly still, my hands folded in my lap, my face a mask of granite. I watched him crawl toward me. He smelled of fear. He smelled of stale wine and salt water. "They hacked me," Brody cried, grabbing the metal rail of the bed, pulling himself up. "I was at the chapel praying just like you said. I went to get a coffee and my cards didn't work. My phone died. They stole my identity, Tobias. Someone wiped me out. They took the house account. They took the car. I had to run here. I had to beg for a ride." He looked at me, his eyes wide and bloodshot, pleading for me to buy the lie. He was banking on my ignorance. He thought I was just a grief-stricken old man who didn't understand technology, who would believe that hackers could tow a car and foreclose on a house in the middle of the night. But more than that, he was banking on my love for Amelia. He thought that even if I suspected him, I wouldn't make a scene while she was lying there. He thought he could use her body as a shield. "How is she?" Brody whispered, reaching out a trembling hand to touch Amelia's leg. "Is she? Did the doctor say anything?" I stood up. I moved slowly, deliberately, unfolding my frame, until I was towering over him. I didn't look at Amelia. I looked directly into his eyes. "Don't touch her," I said. My voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It was the voice I used when I fired a CEO. It was the voice I used when I killed a merger. It was absolute. Brody froze, his hand hovering inches from the blanket. He looked up at me, confused. "Dad," he stammered. I am just worried. What is going on? Why are you looking at me like that? I told you I was hacked. We need to call the bank. We need to call the police." I took a step closer, invading his personal space, forcing him to step back. "You weren't hacked, Brody," I said, my voice cold and hard as ice. "You were liquidated." He blinked stupidly. "Liquidated? What do you mean?" "I mean nobody stole your identity," I said. "I bought it." The confusion on his face deepened for a moment, and then the first cracks of terror began to show. He took a step back, his heel hitting the base of the IV stand. "You," he whispered. "You bought it. 17 minutes after I hung up the phone with you, I purchased the mortgage on the Malibu house from Silver State Lending," I said, reciting the facts like a litany of his sins. 20 minutes after that, I acquired the marine note on the Amelia's Dream. 10 minutes later, I bought the lease on your Rover and your credit card debt. Brody shook his head, trying to process the information, trying to find a way out of the corner I had painted him into. "But why?" he asked, his voice trembling. "Why would you do that?" "I am family. You are a liability," I corrected him. "And I have a strict policy about liabilities. I write them off." I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It wasn't a legal document. It wasn't a court order. It was a printout of the drone photo. The one of him popping the champagne bottle. The one where he was laughing with his head thrown back, while the text message about his wife's impending death sat on his phone screen. I held it up in front of his face. "This is you praying at the chapel?" I asked. Brody stared at the photo. His face went gray. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. He looked from the photo to me and for the first time he realized that the old man wasn't senile. The old man wasn't grieving. The old man was the predator. "I saw you, Brody," I said, stepping closer, pushing him back toward the door. "I saw you celebrating. I heard you shouting, 'I am free.' I heard you promise your mistress a Porsche paid for with my daughter's life insurance." Brody's eyes darted around the room, looking for an exit, looking for a weapon, looking for anything. That is out of context," he sputtered, desperate. I was drunk with grief. I didn't know what I was doing. Cassidy, she manipulated me." "Cassidy is gone," I said. "She left you on the dock. She took the necklace, Brody. Sarah's necklace. The one you stole from my daughter's neck before you pushed her down the stairs." The accusation hung in the air. I hadn't just accused him of fraud. I had accused him of attempted murder. He flinched as if I had hit him. "I didn't push her," he screamed, his voice cracking. "It was an accident. She fell. You can't prove anything. You are crazy. You are a crazy old man who is trying to ruin me." I smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. "You are right, I can't prove you pushed her. Not with a video. But I can prove you drugged her." I pulled out the second piece of paper. The lab report. I shoved it into his chest. "Insulin, Brody," I said. "Exogenous insulin. High levels. Enough to cause a hypoglycemic crash. Enough to make a healthy woman stumble and fall. We know about the injections. We know about Cassidy. And the police are downstairs right now taking a statement from the nurse who drew this blood." Brody crumpled. The fight went out of him. He looked at the paper, then at the floor. The walls were closing in. He realized there was no insurance money coming. There was no house to go back to. There was no boat to sail away on. "You ruined me," he whispered, looking up at me with pure hatred. "You took everything." "I didn't take anything," I said, my voice dropping to a whisper. "I just repossessed it. You were never the owner, Brody. You were just a squatter, and now you are evicted." He looked at Amelia one last time. A flash of something dangerous crossed his face. Desperation. If she was dead, he couldn't be divorced. If she was dead, the testimony would be harder. He took a step toward the bed, his hands curling into fists. "She is my wife," he hissed. "I have rights. You have the right to remain silent," I said, and then I signaled to the corner of the room. "You are not hacked, Brody," I said, "and you are not a husband anymore. You are just a man who missed a payment." I pointed to the door. "Get out." But he didn't move. He lunged. Oh, not at the door. At Amelia. He realized in that split second that she was the only witness who could send him to prison for life. If he could just pull a plug, if he could just create a crisis, he might still have a chance. He screamed a primal sound of rage and threw himself toward the bed, his hands reaching for the ventilator tube. But he never made it, because he forgot one thing. I wasn't alone in the room. Brody never touched the ventilator. He didn't even get close enough to feel the condensation on the tube. Before his fingers could close around the plastic, a voice cut through the air like a serrated blade. "Step away from the patient, Mr. Maxwell." It wasn't a request. It was an order delivered with the kind of authority that stops men dead in their tracks. Brody froze mid-lunge, his body contorted in a grotesque pantomime of violence. He spun around, wild-eyed and feral, to see where the voice had come from. The door to the ensuite bathroom, which had been cracked open just an inch, swung wide. Harper stepped out. She wasn't wearing her usual courtroom armor of Armani and pearls. She was wearing a simple dark suit that made her look like the Grim Reaper's legal counsel. But she wasn't alone. Flanking her were two uniformed officers, their hands resting heavily on their holsters, and a detective I recognized from the golf club, a man named Ltance who didn't play games. Brody stumbled back, crashing into the tray table, sending a pitcher of water shattering to the floor. The sound was like a gunshot in the small room. He looked from Harper to the police to me. The realization hit him like a physical blow. It wasn't just a confrontation. It was a sting operation. Harper. He gasped, his voice trembling. What are you doing here? You are Tobias S. lawyer. You can't be here. This is entrapment. I am not just his lawyer, Brody. Harper said, her voice cool and detached. I am the executor of the estate you tried to steal, and these gentlemen are here to escort you to your new residence. The detective stepped forward, pulling a pair of handcuffs from his belt. The metal clicked ominously. Brody Maxwell, he said, his voice bored and professional. You are under arrest for the attempted murder of Amelia King Maxwell, insurance fraud, grand larceny, and conspiracy to commit homicide. Brody backed up until his back hit the wall. He was shaking his head violently, his eyes wide with denial. No, he screamed. You can't arrest me. You have nothing. The old man is lying. He is senile. He made it all up. The insulin report is fake. He forged it. He is framing me because he hates me. He pointed a shaking finger at me. He is the criminal, Brody yelled, desperate to spin the narrative. He stole my house. He stole my boat. He is ruining me. I didn't say a word. I simply reached into my pocket and pulled out a small black remote. I pointed it at the flat-screen television mounted on the wall opposite the bed. The screen flickered to life, casting a blue glow over the room. You are right about one thing, Brody, I said, my voice low. I hated you, but I never framed you. I didn't have to. You framed yourself. I pressed play. The video on the screen was grainy black and white night vision, but the image was unmistakable. It was the interior of my daughter Aya's bedroom in the Malibu house. The timestamp in the corner read 11:42 p.m. 2 nights ago. Amelia was asleep in the bed. She looked restless, tossing and turning. The door opened slowly. Brody walked in. He wasn't wearing pajamas. He was wearing gloves. Latex gloves. On the screen, the digital Brody walked to the side of the bed. He watched her for a moment. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small case. He opened it and took out a syringe. He held it up to the moonlight, flicking the barrel to clear the air bubbles. It was a practiced motion. Cold, clinical. The room was silent, except for the harsh breathing of the real Brody standing against the wall, watching his own crime play out in high definition. On the screen, Brody leaned over. He didn't kiss her forehead. He didn't stroke her hair. He grabbed her arm roughly. Amelia flinched in her sleep. He jammed the needle into her upper arm and depressed the plunger. She woke up then. She tried to pull away. The video showed her mouth moving, screaming, but there was no sound. It showed Brody holding her down, his hand over her mouth, until she stopped struggling, until the drug took hold and she slumped back against the pillows. Then he arranged the covers. He took the syringe, put it back in his pocket, and walked out of the room. I paused the video on the frame of him leaving the room. His face was turned toward the camera. He was smiling. Brody stared at the screen, his mouth agape. Where did you get that? He whispered. There are no cameras in the bedroom. I checked. I swept the room for bugs. You swept for bugs, I said. You didn't sweep for a teddy bear. I pointed to the shelf in the video. A stuffed bear sat there watching. Amelia called me 2 weeks ago, I explained. She was scared. She knew you were stealing. She knew something was wrong. I told her to protect herself. She bought a nanny cam, Brody. A motion-activated camera hidden inside a toy. She didn't trust you. And because she is my daughter, she was smart enough to set it to upload to a secure cloud server. I took a step toward him. She sent me the access key right before she passed out, I said. It took my tech team an hour to decrypt the files, but we got it. We saw everything. We saw you inject her. We saw you wait. We saw you drag her out of bed an hour later when she could barely stand and walk her to the stairs. Brody looked at the TV, then at me. The denial was gone. The arrogance was gone. All that was left was the raw, ugly face of a cornered animal. "She set me up," he screamed, spitting the words out. "That bitch set me up. She knew. She let me do it so she could ruin me." He wasn't sorry. He wasn't ashamed. He was furious that he had been outsmarted by the wife he thought was stupid. "She ruined my life," he roared, his face turning purple. "She baited me. She wanted me to fail. She never loved me. She just wanted to control me like you do." He pushed off the wall, his eyes locking onto Amelia's unconscious form. The hatred in his gaze was so intense it felt like heat radiating across the room. "You think you won," he yelled at her sleeping face. "You think you beat me." He lunged. It wasn't a calculated move this time. It was pure, unadulterated rage. He wanted to hurt her. He wanted to finish what he started. He threw himself across the room, his hands reaching for her throat, his fingers curled into claws. Harper screamed. The police officers scrambled to intercept him, but they were caught off guard by the sudden explosion of violence. Brody was fast. He was younger than me, stronger than me, and fueled by the adrenaline of a man who knows his life is over. He cleared the distance to the bed in 2 strides. But I was waiting. I had been waiting for this moment since I saw the empty chair. I had been waiting for this since I saw the insulin report. I wasn't just a businessman. I was a father. And there is no force on earth more dangerous than a father protecting his child. I didn't step back. I stepped in. I intercepted him a foot from the bed. I didn't use a lawyer. I didn't use a contract. I used a right hook that I hadn't thrown since 1978 in a bar fight in South Chicago. My fist connected with his jaw with a sickening crack. It was the sound of justice. It was the sound of a debt being paid in full. Brody's head snapped back. His momentum stopped dead. He crumpled to the floor, crashing into the IV stand, tangling himself in the tubes he had tried to weaponize. He lay there on the linoleum, groaning, blood pouring from his lip, dazed and broken. I stood over him, rubbing my knuckles. My hand hurt. It was a good hurt. The officers were on him in a second, dragging him up, slamming him against the wall, cuffing his hands behind his back. "Get him out of here," I said, breathless but steady. "Get him out of my sight before I finish the job." Brody spat blood at my shoes. "You are old," he wheezed. "You can't protect her forever. I will be back. I will get out on bail and I will come back." "You won't get bail," the detective said, tightening the cuffs. "Not with that video. That is capital attempted murder, son. You are going away for a long time." As they dragged him toward the door, Brody looked back at the TV screen, where the loop of his crime was still playing. He looked at the evidence of his own monstrosity. "She deserved it," he muttered. "She deserved it." The door slammed shut, cutting off his voice. The room fell silent again, save for the steady beep of the monitor. I turned back to the bed. I expected to see Amelia still sleeping, still unaware of the violence that had just erupted around her. But her eyes were open. They were glassy and weak, but they were open. She was looking at the door where her husband had just been dragged away. She was looking at me. And in her eyes I saw a fire that matched my own. She hadn't just survived. She had witnessed. "Dad," she whispered, her voice a dry rasp that sounded like sandpaper. I rushed to her side, grabbing her hand. "Amelia. Honey. Do not try to speak. You are safe. He is gone." She squeezed my hand. Her grip was weak, but it was there. "I heard him," she whispered. "I heard everything." She tried to sit up, wincing as the pain hit her. "He didn't know, Dad," she said, tears forming in her eyes. "Know what, honey?" I asked, brushing the hair from her forehead. "The insulin," she gasped. "He used so much." But he didn't know. She looked at me, and the revelation she was about to make terrified me more than the knife or the needle. "He didn't know I was pregnant," she said. The world stopped spinning. The air left the room. "Pregnant. I have gestational diabetes," she wept. "My blood sugar. It was already unstable. The insulin. It didn't just hurt me, Dad. It killed the baby." The sob that ripped from her throat was the sound of a heart breaking in real time. "He killed his own child," she screamed, "and he didn't even know it." I stood there frozen. The victory, the financial ruin, the arrest, it all turned to ash in my mouth. Brody hadn't just tried to kill his wife. In his greed, in his ignorance, he had murdered his own unborn child. The monster was gone. But the damage he left behind was infinite. The impact of my fist against Brody's jaw sent a shockwave up my arm that rattled my own teeth. It was a sensation I hadn't felt in 40 years since I fought my way out of the Chicago stockyards. It wasn't the clean, sterile victory of a lawsuit. It was dirty. It was visceral. It was the only language a man like Brody understood. He crumpled to the floor like a puppet whose strings had been cut, tangling in the wires of the machines he had tried to weaponize against my daughter. The police officers were on him instantly. Their knees pressed into his back, pinning him to the cold linoleum. The handcuffs clicked shut with a sound that signaled the end of his freedom, but the room was still vibrating with the violence of the moment. My chest heaved. I rubbed my bruised knuckles, staring down at the man who had turned my life into a nightmare. He was spitting blood, groaning, trying to lift his head to shout more lies, more denials, more poison. But then a sound cut through the chaos. It wasn't a scream. It wasn't a siren. It was a voice. Weak and raspy, but filled with a cold, terrifying clarity. "Brody." The room froze. The police officers stopped moving. Harper gasped. I turned slowly toward the bed, my heart hammering against my ribs. Amelia's eyes were open. She wasn't looking at me. She wasn't looking at the ceiling. Her gaze was locked on the floor, on the man bleeding onto the tiles. Her eyes were not the eyes of a victim anymore. They were the eyes of a judge. They burned with a fire that had been forged in betrayal and tempered by grief. She had been awake. She had been listening. She had heard his tantrum, his confession, his attempt to finish the job. Brody twisted his neck, straining against the officer's grip to look at her. His face was a mask of shock, and for a fleeting second, a twisted kind of hope. "Amelia," he wheezed, blood bubbling on his lips. "Baby, tell them. Tell them I love you. Tell them it was an accident." Amelia slowly pushed herself up. She winced as the movement pulled at her IV lines, but she didn't stop. She wanted him to see her. She wanted him to see that he had failed. "You forgot one thing, Brody," she said, her voice gaining strength with every word. "You thought you were so smart. You thought you planned the perfect crime. You researched the insulin. You knew it would disappear from the blood. You knew it would look like a faint." She took a breath, a ragged sound that tore at my soul. "But you didn't read my chart," she whispered. "You didn't check the recent updates. You were too busy partying on the boat to notice that I went to the doctor 3 days ago." Brody blinked, confusion warring with the pain in his eyes. "Chart," he stammered. "What chart?" "I have gestational diabetes, Brody," she said. The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. "My blood sugar is monitored constantly." She continued, her voice trembling, not with fear, but with a fury so deep it felt like it could crack the walls. "When you injected me, when you pumped that massive dose of insulin into my system, my body didn't just react like a normal person. It crashed instantly. The paramedics saw the glucose levels immediately. The doctors knew within 5 minutes that it wasn't natural. You didn't create a mystery, Brody. You left a signature." Brody went pale beneath the blood and dirt on his face. He shook his head. "I didn't know," he whispered. I didn't know, but you didn't let him finish. Amelia leaned forward, her knuckles white as she gripped the bed rail. And there is something else you didn't know, she said. The reason I have gestational diabetes. I watched Brody S.'s face. I saw the moment the gears turned. I saw the moment the realization hit him. His eyes widened until they were almost perfectly round. His mouth opened, but no air came in. The baby, Amelia said. Her voice broke, then shattering into a million pieces. We were going to surprise you on your birthday next week. I was 12 weeks along. It was a boy. A boy! Brody stopped struggling. He stopped breathing. He went completely limp under the officer's hands. You killed him, Brody! Amelia screamed, the sound raw and guttural tearing from her throat. The insulin caused a placental abruption. The crash, the fall, he didn't make it. The doctors couldn't save him. You didn't just try to kill me. You killed your son. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the silence of a tomb. Brody stared at her. The arrogance, the greed, the narcissism, it all evaporated. He wasn't a mastermind anymore. He wasn't a victim. He was a father who had murdered his own child for a payout he would never see. No, he whispered. The word was barely a breath. No. No, no. He began to shake, a violent full-body tremor. He curled into a ball on the floor, hiding his face in the tiles. A sound escaped him, a high-pitched keen of pure psychological agony. It wasn't the cry of a man sorry for his crimes. It was the cry of a man whose reality had just fractured beyond repair. He had justified everything to himself until this moment. He had told himself it was just business. He had told himself she was in the way. But this was a line even his twisted soul couldn't cross without breaking. He killed his heir. He killed the legacy he was so desperate to fund. Get him out of here, I said, my voice ice cold. Get him out before I kill him. The police officers hauled him up. Brody didn't resist. He was dead weight. His legs dragged on the floor. He was sobbing uncontrollably, snot and blood mixing on his face, mumbling over and over, I didn't know. I didn't know. He looked at Amelia one last time as they dragged him through the doorway. His eyes were empty holes. He was a broken man. He was a shell. Amelia didn't look away. She watched him go. She watched the father of her dead child be dragged away to a cage. And when the door finally closed, she didn't collapse. She didn't faint. She looked at me. Dad, she whispered, holding out her hand. I rushed to her, wrapping her in my arms, burying my face in her hair. I held her as she finally let go as the sobs racked her body. I held her and I promised myself that I would spend the rest of my life making sure she never felt pain like this again. He is gone, honey, I whispered. He is gone and he is never coming back. But the victory felt like ash in my mouth. We had won. We had destroyed him. But the cost was too high. A life that never got to begin. A grandson I would never hold. I looked at the closed door. Brody Maxwell was going to prison. But that wasn't enough punishment. I knew that for the rest of his life, every time he closed his eyes in his cell, every time he tried to sleep, he would see this moment. He would hear her voice. He would know that he didn't just lose the money. He killed the only thing that could have ever loved him unconditionally. And that, I realized with a cold, grim satisfaction, was a hell far worse than anything I could have designed. The door clicked shut, and the silence that followed was heavy, not with peace, but with the crushing weight of a tragedy that could never be fully undone. Brody was gone, dragged down the hospital corridor, kicking and screaming, leaving a trail of blood and shattered promises. The district attorney assured me later that night that he would never see the outside of a prison cell again. In the state of California, the murder of an unborn child during the commission of a felony carries a special kind of weight. They called it fetal homicide. I called it the end of the line. There would be no plea deals. There would be no parole. Harper made sure of that. She buried him under a mountain of evidence so high, he would need a climbing axe just to see the sun. But Brody wasn't the only loose end. Cassidy, the woman who had injected the poison thinking she was earning a Porsche, tried to run. She was smart enough to leave the marina, but she wasn't smart enough to outrun my network. She made it as far as Los Angeles International Airport. She was sitting in the first-class lounge sipping a mimosa with a one-way ticket to Dubai in her purse when airport security tapped her on the shoulder. She tried to play the innocent victim. She tried to cry on cue, but when they opened her carry-on bag, the sparkle of diamonds ended her performance. She had my wife's necklace wrapped in a pair of socks. She also had 3 watches and a platinum bracelet she had pilfered from my daughter Az's jewelry box during her shifts as a nurse. Grand larceny, accessory to attempted murder, conspiracy. She was booked before her flight even boarded. When they handcuffed her, she didn't ask for a lawyer. She asked if she could keep the miles. That was the kind of soul we were dealing with. A vacuum wrapped in skin. In the weeks that followed, I went to work doing what I do best. Liquidation. I treated Brody's life like a failing company that needed to be stripped for parts. I didn't want his things. I didn't want the money I recovered. It was tainted. It felt dirty in my hands. I sold the Malibu house. The fortress of lies where he had tried to kill my daughter went to a tech billionaire for a loss, and I didn't care. I sold the Range Rover to a scrap dealer just to watch it get crushed into a cube of metal. And the yacht. The Amelia S. Dream. The vessel where he celebrated while my daughter lay dying. I had it hauled out of the water. I could have sold it for millions, but I couldn't bear the thought of someone else sailing on that cursed deck. I donated it to a marine biology institute to be stripped and sunk as an artificial reef. It sits at the bottom of the Pacific now, a home for fish and coral, a better purpose than it ever served under Brody's command. The proceeds from the sales, every single cent, went to the neonatal intensive care unit at Cedars-Sinai. I bought them new incubators. I bought them monitoring systems. I tried to buy life for other children, since I couldn't buy it for my grandson. It was a check I wrote with a shaking hand, but it was the only transaction that gave me any peace. 2 months later, Amelia was finally strong enough to travel. Los Angeles had nothing for us anymore. The sun felt cold. The ocean looked like a graveyard. We were going home. Back to Chicago. Back to the wind and the steel and the grit, where we belonged. On our last day, I wheeled Amelia out to the terrace of the rental house we had been staying in during her recovery. She sat in the wheelchair, a blanket over her legs, looking out at the vast, indifferent ocean. Her hair was growing back, covering the scars from the surgery, but the shadow in her eyes was permanent. She was thinner, harder. The naive girl who believed in fairy tales was gone. In her place was a woman who had looked into the abyss and survived. She took a deep breath of the salty air and didn't look at me when she spoke. "You were right, Dad," she said, her voice soft but steady. "You tried to warn me. You tried to tell me about him. I didn't listen." I put my hand on her shoulder, squeezing gently. "We don't look back, Amelia," I said. "We only look forward." She turned her head and looked up at me. Her eyes were dry. She had run out of tears weeks ago. "He loved the money," she said. "He loved the lifestyle. He loved the idea of me, but he never loved me. Not for a second." She paused, looking down at her empty ring finger. "Money doesn't buy loyalty, does it, Dad?" she whispered. "It just rents people for a while. And when the rent runs out, they turn on you." It was a hard lesson. The hardest lesson. I looked at the horizon, thinking about the empire I had built, the fortune I had amassed. I had spent my life believing that wealth was a shield, that it could protect the people I loved. But I had learned that gold attracts dragons. It attracts predators who smile with too many teeth. "No, honey," I said, kneeling beside her chair so I could look her in the eye. "Money doesn't buy loyalty. It doesn't buy love. It can't buy back time, and it certainly can't buy back what he took from us. I took her hand in mine, feeling the strength returning to her grip. But money is a tool, Amelia. It is a hammer. And if you know how to hold it, you can use it to build a wall to keep the monsters out. Or you can use it to crush them when they try to get in. She nodded slowly, understanding dawning in her expression. Money bought the lawyers, I said. Money bought the investigators. Money bought the debt that trapped him. Money didn't save you from the fall, Amelia, but it bought the justice that buried him. Never apologize for having it. Just never forget what it is for. It is a weapon, and you need to be the one holding the handle, not the blade. She looked at me, and for the first time in months, I saw a flicker of the old Amelia. But it was different. It was tougher. She wasn't just my daughter anymore. She was a survivor. Let's go home, Dad, she said. I am done with the sun. We flew back to Chicago that afternoon. We left the ghosts in California. Brody Maxwell is currently sitting in a 6x8 cell in a maximum security facility in the desert. He spends 23 hours a day alone. He has the rest of his natural life to think about the Porsche he never got and the son he murdered. Every appeal Harper files a motion to block. Every parole hearing I will be there. He is my project now, my eternal investment. As for me, I am back in my office overlooking the Chicago River. The skyline is gray and jagged and beautiful. I am retired, but I am always watching. I turn to face you now. You, the viewer who has followed this story from the yacht party to the prison cell. You might think this is just a story about a rich man and his problems. But it isn't. It is a story about boundaries. It is a story about seeing people for who they really are, not who you want them to be. Take a good look at the people around you. The ones who smile too much. The ones who ask about your finances a little too often. The ones who are there for the champagne but vanish when the bill comes. Trust your gut. If something feels wrong, it is. And if you ever find yourself in a situation where someone tries to hurt your family, remember my story. Remember that kindness is not a weakness, but justice is a necessity. Do not let them get away with it. Document everything. Buy the debt. Close the trap. And one last thing. A personal note from Tobias King. If you are watching this and you think you can target my family because we are back in business, think again. I might be 72 years old. I might walk with a cane sometimes, but I am not a victim. Don't ever touch my family. Because I don't just have money. I have patience. I have resources. And I have a memory that never fades. If you cross the line, I won't just sue you. I will dismantle you. I will wait until you think you are safe, until you think you have won, and then I will turn off the lights. This is Tobias King signing off. If you learned something today, if you believe in justice served cold, hit that like button and subscribe. Share this story. Let it be a warning to the wolves that the lions are still awake. Stay safe. Stay vigilant. And never sign a waiver without reading the fine print. In the end, I learned that wealth is a magnifier. It reveals the true nature of everyone around you. Brody thought my money was his safety net, but he forgot that nets are designed to trap. The biggest mistake a predator can make is assuming that a quiet man is a weak man. I spent 40 years building an empire not to buy luxury, but to buy the power to protect what matters. If you love someone, guard them fiercely. And if someone betrays that love, do not just walk away. Ensure they can never hurt anyone else again. True justice isn't given by the courts. It is taken by those with the will to enforce it. If you believe in protecting family at all costs, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of justice served. Cold, tell me in the comments, what would you have done in my place?